بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد إخوة الإسلام عباد الله. This video is for the purpose of addressing the anti-black sentiment that's found with some immigrant Muslims. And when I say some immigrant Muslims, this is as it relates to whoever they may be, from whatever background they may have, from whatever country they may be from. Because the reality is you find it in just about every group of people from amongst the Muslims who are immigrants here in the U.S., including those coming from Africa, West Africa. And so I want to make this explicitly clear. I'm saying anti-black sentiment that comes from some immigrant Muslims and not all. So I want to emphasize that. Second, I'm not doing this video because myself, as a black American who's Muslim, or any other black American that happens to be Muslim, is trying to achieve or obtain some type of validation from anyone. Now, that's not why this video is being done. We could care less in that regard. Nor are we trying to gain acceptance from anyone or any group of people. Oh, please just accept me. Oh, please just accept me. No, we're not coming from that bab or that perspective, neither. But we are, when looking at the text of the Quran and the Sunnah, we're coming from this perspective because this is a munkar. This is an evil that the Islamic legislation doesn't condone. And this anti-black sentiment, regardless of where it's coming from, or what the source of it may be, regardless if it's colonized minds or people having racism with them, or other than that, whatever the means may be, the end result of that means is that it's a munkar, it's an evil. And we as Muslims are obligated to remove whatever munkar that may be amongst our ranks. And so I'll illustrate where I'm coming from in terms of the Kitab and the Sunnah shortly, inshallah. Now, the reason why I'm doing this video is because one of the brothers from West Africa, from Mali, I believe, he was informing me about how his mother, when he was coming to America, his mother advised him to stay away from black Americans. Stay away from black Americans. If you are around black Americans, X, Y, and Z from these negative things can befall you. X, Y, and Z from these negative things could befall you. And so this brother, he gave a testimony, and he was stating that when he came to America, when he was packing to go to America, he was ready to come to America and actually fall into disbelief. Why? Because he believed there was no Muslims in America, and he felt that he had to go with the flow or go with the program in order to achieve or obtain whatever he was coming to achieve or obtain. But it wasn't until after landing here that he got with the black Americans from amongst the Muslims that not only one, that he started to strengthen in faith, but two, because he was placed around a student of knowledge from amongst the black Americans, that he actually started to learn his religion. He actually started to learn his deen. He actually started to learn what Sunnah is, and what the way of the Salaf is, and what the correct Aqidah is, and thus for so on. Things that he didn't know prior to coming to America, and prior to being around these black Americans that he was advised to stay away from, because of the mindset that is held for black Americans where he comes from. That there's a negative outlook that's held for, or negative understanding as it relates to black people here in America. But by Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala's permission, black American Muslims were the means for this individual to get on his deen. And there are other examples, like I said, I have my own experiences that I could talk about, but that's not the point. Because at this point, I have no doubt that most black American Muslims here in the U.S. have experienced anti-black sentiment from some immigrant brothers and sisters, people out of immigrant communities, regardless if they're Palestinian or Syrian or whatever the case may be. If they're from some parts of Africa or whatever the case may be. The point that I'm making is it's a munkar and it clashes with the text of the Quran and the Sunnah. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He teaches us, وَاعْتَسِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذْ كُنْتُمْ أَعْدَاءً فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا وكنتم على شفا حفرة من النار فأنقذكم منها الآية. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He states, and cling to the rope of Allah altogether and do not be divided. And remember my favor upon you when you all were enemies. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala joined your hearts together, and as a result of this, you all became brothers. But prior to that, you were on the brink of a pit of fire, and He saved you all from it. So in this verse, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is referring to the believers, those that are clinging to Allah's rope, that they were once enemies, but consequently became brothers as a result of acceptance of this guidance. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He teaches us, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ, that the believers are only brothers. The believers are only brothers. Now, I want to read from the statements of Sheikh Abdurrahman ibn Nasir al-Sa'di rahimahullah from his tafsir of the Quran when it comes to the statement which is rendered into English to mean the believers are only brothers. He states, هذا عقد, this is a covenant, this is a contract, this is an agreement that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala has made binding between the believers. أنه إذا وجد من أي شخص كان في مشرق الأرض ومغربها الإيمان بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر فإنه أخ للمؤمنين. He states that if one was to find any individual, regardless of who it may be, in the most eastern, farthest, the furthest eastern region of the earth, or western portion of the earth, and he has al-Iman in Allah, His angels, His books, His messengers, and the last day, then undoubtedly he is a brother to the believers. And this brotherhood, it makes binding that the believers love him. And they love him, or they love for him, يعني أن يحب له المؤمنون ما يحبون لأنفسهم, that they love for him, the believers love for him what they love for themselves, and they hate for him what they hate for themselves. And on account of this, the Prophet ﷺ, he stated while commanding with this faith-based brotherhood, لا تحاسدوا ولا تناجشوا ولا تباغضوا ولا تدابروا وكونوا عباد الله إخوانا المسلم أخو المسلم. The Prophet ﷺ, he states, or he said, do not be envious of one another, and do not cause the inflating of prices upon one another, and do not hate one another, and do not abandon one another. On the contrary, be servants of Allah, brothers. The Muslim is a brother of a Muslim. And of course, the Muslim is a brother of a Muslim. It doesn't matter what your ethnic background may be, what your race may be. The Muslim is a brother of a Muslim. This needs to be understood. He does not oppress him, nor does he forsake him, nor does he call him a liar. Muttafaqun alayh, and the hadith is muttafaqun alayh. And likewise, within the two authentic collections, that which is from the Prophet ﷺ, al-mu'min lil-mu'min kal-bunyan yashuddu ba'dahu ba'dan. That the believer is like the believer to another is like a structure, one part fortifying the other, one part fortifying the other. And so this is why we're talking about this issue. This is why we're talking about this issue. Because if we have al-iman billah the way that Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala intends, then again, the Muslim is the brother of a Muslim. The Muslim is a brother of a Muslim, regardless of what your ethnic background may be, or what your bloodline may be, or what your race may be, and thus forth and so on. And so whenever we have these type of hateful sentiments towards others, or towards a group of people that are Muslim, but they're this specific group, regardless if they're this specific ethnic group or specific racial group, or from this particular country, so we have this negative outlook because they're from this country, and thus forth and so on. Then how is this sentiment in accordance with what the text is stating? From the statements of Allah first and foremost, then from the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or the statements of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that were quoted by Sheikh Abdul Rahman ibn Nasir al-Sa'di in this tafsir. How is this sentiment aligned with these statements? And quite honestly, we can all answer this and state that it contradicts these statements. Thus, it's a munkar. Thus, it's an evil that needs to be spoken out against. And we as Muslims here in America, regardless of what your ethnic background may be or your racial background may be, then whenever we see this type of evil within the community, then it is incumbent upon us to call it out. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to call it out. Because if we're supposed to be one brotherhood, and we're supposed to be one nation, then this type of sentiment, this anti-black sentiment, is the type of sentiment that causes a fracture and a fracture in the unity, a fracture in the togetherness, a split or separation in that regard. And this is the very means us differing, splitting, falling into factions, and thus forth and so on, regardless of what the factions may be. This tribe over here, I'm from this country and my tribe, and we only function with my tribe. Yes, we all say La ilaha illallah, but we only function with each other. This is a munkar. This is a means to defeat. This is a means to yani, the Muslims being humiliated and debased and lowered in the society. And so for this reason, this type of munkar needs to be addressed, called out, and repelled. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He teaches us, وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَلَا تَنَازَعُوا فَتَفْشَلُوا وَتَذْهَبَ رِيحُكُمْ, to the end of the ayah. And obey Allah and His Messenger, and do not fall into, and do not divide amongst each other, lest you become emasculated and your strength departs. And your strength departs. So if we start separating and splitting over things of this nature, yani he's black, we're black, you know, we group together because we're black, and those white Muslims over there, y'all stay over there, or we group together because I'm from this country, I'm from Egypt, the Egyptians, or I'm from Philistine, and the Philistines, we're doing what we're doing over here amongst us, or I'm from Somalia, or I'm from this place or that place. This is splitting that brotherhood that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is informing us of in these verses that were previously mentioned. And as a result, it becomes a munkar. It becomes an evil. And it becomes binding on the Muslims to repel that evil. Now, I think this is the point that I'm making is explicitly clear, and I'm going to cut it here, all right? Because I record these videos later on in the night, and once I start stumbling over my words, I know I'm really tired, so it's time to sign out. I just wanted to get this point across by Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala's permission, and I hope the gist of what I'm saying is internalized. And again, we are people that enjoy the good and forbid the evil, and so we need to start enjoying the good and forbidding the evil, especially as it relates to this evil that's amongst some of us. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows best. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.